Hello, Ben. Hello, Ben.
Hello, Clement.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us. We are here, your students, we are all here waiting for you. The floor is all yours. Now you can take us through, you introduce yourself formally, and then take us through what you have for us today. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, everyone, wherever you are joining us from. It's a pleasure to be in this meeting or to take you through this session or this course for today. My name is Benjamin Opoku Aye. I'm with the Parliamentary Network Africa. As a senior programs officer, also with the Africa PMOs Network Secretariat, which is also here at PN Africa. I'm happy that today we have chosen this topic or this subject for us to deliberate or discuss, as I want it to be in today's session. And so the topic we are supposed to discuss is existing mechanisms of parliament at the regional and continental level. And before I proceed, may I know whether you can hear me clearly and you can see my screen also? Can everyone hear me and see my screen?
Yes, I can hear you. It's Tammy Mkandla from ZFM Stereo in Zimbabwe.
Okay, I can also hear you clearly. I'm Lizzie from Nigeria.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much for the feedback. And so I'll quickly go through what we have today. And so just as I said, in today's discussion or in today's session, we want to look at the existing mechanisms of parliament at the regional and continental level. So this is a topic chosen for us to help us understand the various tools, the various opportunities, the various mechanisms or platforms as media people or as media men, as journalists, we can use or we can leverage to engage parliamentarians at the continental level and even at the national level and all of that. And also how we can advocate for change in policies, influence laws, and all the activities and programs that these regional parliaments seek to pass or seek to, implement. And so in this meeting, what we are going to look at is a quick overview and the role of the regional parliaments that we have in Africa. So here we are looking at the regional parliaments in Africa, and we'll look at a couple of the regional parliaments that we have in our continent. We will do some comparison of the various parliaments that we have in here. We'll look at their roles, what are their strengths, what are the challenges they are facing and all of that. And then we'll look at how they work using the committee system, right? So I'm sure we would have an understanding that at the local or national level, there is a committee system that our national parliaments use, where we usually refer to as the engine room of parliaments or legislative assemblies. And so here we'll look at the regional level also, what are the committee systems, what are they, how do they look like, and how do they function? How can we also plug into that? We would also look at the relationship between regional parliaments and then the national parliaments, right? A lot of the time, the structures allow for connecting through the national parliaments to the regional parliaments. And so we'll look at how these two bodies or these two institutions work together and how they collaborate. And then finally, we'll look at, of course, some of the challenges that these parliaments face. And then we'll also look at the opportunities that we can strengthen these parliaments, even as media men, as journalists. How do we support these parliaments to ensure that they are delivering on the mandates or the functions that they've been entrusted to? So and here I'm going to give a brief history about the emergence of regional parliaments. Right from history shows us that usually regional parliaments are instituted or emerge out of, the quest to bring together some countries, the quest to, unite, the quest to whether to implement certain economic or social policies, or to take certain political decisions that affect more than just one country, right? So when you take some of the immediate or some of the first regional parliaments, for instance, which is the EU Parliament that emerged or that was constituted sometime in 1957. It came about as a result of, the post-World War and all the issues, the problems that it brought about. And so the idea for countries to come together to ensure that they have policies that are preventing future wars. They have policies that are going to, release or reduce the effect of poverty, because, after this war, a lot of the social challenges like poverty, a lot of the conflicts and all of the other things that we usually see come with conflicts. And so that is when the EU Parliament, which is the first regional parliament that globally was established, and then also followed by the Latin American parliaments, and also around similar issues or for similar reasons also, they also constituted to unite, to have common political goals, to have common economic goals or economic policies to see how best they can reduce some of the frictions and the conflicts in their region. And when you come to Africa also, it has been similar, very similar, right? So some of the very major global issues that we can speak about when we come to Africa is the political wave in Africa during the time when independence, when countries became conscious of themselves, and so the struggle for independence and all of that. These were the period that African countries also began to discuss or to talk about regional integration, to talk about economic integration, and coming together as a common body, to help salvage some of the very daring situations that we faced at the time. Of course, again, also, it was as a result of, during those times, because of colonialism and because of the economic conditions that we faced, usually you'd have you have our early leaders, go back to the economic institutions, that's the global institutions. You have them go for loans, you have them go for support, economic reliefs, and all of that. And these reliefs or these support, financial support, usually came with its own conditions, its own conditionalities, right? And so some of these conditionalities necessitated that Africa came together, or necessitated that countries in Africa also found ways they can support themselves financially, found ways they can help themselves alleviate themselves or their citizens from poverty, not always going to the global institutions for financial support and all of that. So all of these background issues are those issues that influences or influenced the establishment or the emergence of regional parliaments globally and here in Africa. And so when you come to Africa, I'm sure we know about the regional parliaments that we have. And so here we have the East African Legislative Assembly, which usually or which comprises the countries in the eastern of Africa, in the east of Africa. It also has the Economic Community of West African States Parliament, which is the ECOWAS Parliament, which most of us are familiar with. We also have the Interparliamentary Union of Intergovernmental Authority on Development. This I know may be new to some of us, but it's also one of the regional parliaments that comprises countries from the Horn of Africa, right? Even though not very active, so we don't hear of them a lot, but on paper or technically, they also exist, but operationally, it hasn't been very effective. We then have the Pan-African Parliament, which we all are aware of. And then finally, we have the Southern African Development Community Parliamentary Forum, which is the SADC, which those of us in Southern Africa are also aware of. What are the roles of these parliaments usually, right? What usually are the functions, or what do we expect from these parliaments as an institution? And so commonly or usually you would have the basic role of these parliaments as, enhancing regional integration, enhancing democratic governance and political globalization, basically, right? And so just like any parliament at all, just like any parliamentary institution or any institution of parliament, you have the three basic roles of parliament, which is the representation, the role of legislation, and then also the role of oversight, right? Of course, I know in your mind, you may be asking or you may be questioning whether indeed these parliaments discharge or perform their roles as established in their frameworks or as expected of them. We'll catch up on those conversations very soon in the presentation, where we'll look at whether they've been able to, or they've played an effective role in discharging all these basic functions of representation, legislation, and oversight. One of the major roles or key roles of these regional parliaments also is to strengthen and accelerate economic integration and development, right? So as regional bodies, one of the things they seek to do is to ensure that the economic activities on a particular continent, the economic activities wherever they find themselves are streamlined, whether it's economic policies or conventions they have to pass, they ensure that they are doing so. And also, how do they ensure that countries enjoy or countries benefit from each other? Countries are able to...
Hello. Because I was looking for him to give him the status, but I can't find him. So he's now joining. But so Ben, can you continue whilst we are sorting this out?
Okay. All right. That's fine.
All right. Okay.
Okay. So one of the other roles that regional parliaments play also is to encourage good governance, transparency, and accountability in a region where or where we find ourselves in corruption, where we find ourselves in bad governance, where we find ourselves in weak structures and mechanisms to check executive powers and political office holders and all of that. It is good that these regional parliaments ensure that the governance that we are practicing in the region is something that inures to the benefits of the citizens of the continent. And then again, also when it comes to transparency, when it comes to budgets, how our political office holders spending the taxpayers' money? How are we ensuring that members of parliament, how are we ensuring that politicians are accounting to the people who elected them, or who on whose behalf they've been appointed to serve the public interest? Again, also these regional platforms or these regional parliaments helps to promote public participation in regional governance, right? I'm sure you may have your own questions, whether indeed as a citizen of, say, Sierra Leone, as a citizen of, say, Gambia or Ghana, are you able to effectively participate in regional governance? Are you able to participate in the work of, say, Pan-African Parliament or the ECOWAS Parliament, right? So these are all questions that we have on our minds. But of course, ideally, these regional parliaments are supposed to promote public participation to ensure that when it comes to decision-making in the parliament, when it comes to elections, when it comes to appointments, when it comes to lawmaking and convention and all of that, citizens in the continent participate effectively. Apart from the role that these regional parliaments play, they also serve some importance, right? They are very significant, and these significance lays in the role that they play. So when it comes to ensuring good governance and promoting good governance principles, so when it comes to ensuring that countries are implement regional conventions.
Which we'll talk about here is listening.
Is someone speaking?
When you listen and listen deeply, you'll get.
Clement, are you speaking?
No, please go on.
Okay. Yes, so one of the significance is for them to, of course, to ensure that countries, or to ensure that citizens, or to ensure basically that there is good governance. And how do they do this? They do this through implementing or ratifying or passing conventions that ensures that there are democratic elections, that ensures that citizens' rights are protected, that ensures that there is transparency in the dealings of governments, that ensures that public office holders are accountable to the people. Again, they are there to promote peace, security, and ensure stability, right? As a continent of Africa, you can imagine, right, if we were not to have our regional parliaments, right? You could imagine the chaos, even though, of course, I'm sure we will still be questioning whether they've been able to play their role effectively when it comes to promoting peace and security and ensuring that there is stability on the continent. But of course, we are expecting them to do that effectively. Again, it's for them to ensure that the rights of the people are protected and promoted, right? So it is for the regional parliaments to identify what are the human rights issues that are prevailing, right? And that are emerging, that we need to legalize, we need to regulate, we need to ensure that there are laws and conventions or policies that would ensure that countries are implementing to protect the rights of their citizens. Again, also, they ensure that citizens understand or even get to know of some of these rights that perhaps their countries, their national parliaments, or in country they may not be aware of. And so they are supposed to be doing this. And then they are also supposed to facilitate cooperation and sustain development on the continent. And by so doing, I mentioned earlier that they facilitate economic integration. So when it comes to trading, when it comes to movement of goods and people and services, when it comes to developing the country in terms of infrastructure and all of that, technology, everything, it is the regional parliament that ensures that the continent is moving in the direction that meets global new emergence or new discoveries, right? When it comes to trade and technology and all of the other major issues that affect our lives. I mentioned again that one of the ways that these regional parliaments perform their role, or one of their significance, is to ensure that we are able to participate in the decision making that they take, right, in these parliaments. So when it comes to elections and all of that, of course, one of the major issues that we have when it comes to the operations of our regional parliaments, especially in Africa, is whether citizens are able to elect the representatives of these assemblies or not. Of course, all these issues are standing, and these are some of the issues that as media men, as journalists, we need to be advocating, and we need to be pushing for them to be practicalized or operationalized. Again, also, they provide a platform for us to discuss common issues of common interest for countries, right? So when it comes to trade, when it comes to development, whether it's technology, whether it's issues of gender, right? On these platforms, countries come together to discuss what are some of the issues that we can implement in our countries that can sign throughout the continent. What are some of the things that the common challenges that we can discuss and see the solutions that we can prefer to tackle all of these challenges. Again, also, it is for these regional parliaments to facilitate the ratification and harmonization of the laws and the policies that countries adopt or pass. And so once we have regional parliaments, it is for them to ensure that when, say, a country is passing a gender bill or a gender law, does that law fall in line? Does it align with international convention? Does it align with the regional policy, the regional convention that we have set or adopted for ourselves? It is their role to ensure that the laws and the policies adopted by countries are in line with the regional goals or the regional inspirations that we have as a continent. Of course, commonly is to strengthen solidarity and all of that. Again, these regional parliaments build partnerships and cooperation, whether internally in the region or with other partners outside of the region. Again, through these regional platforms, we are able to, or these parliaments are able to strengthen and build their capacity, right? So once parliaments work together, they are able to identify whether their members of parliament, whether their staff need capacity building or need to be supported in various ways, whether CSOs or whether media can support them in various ways. And you realize that sometimes these regional parliaments would hold capacity building workshops for their MPs, even for their committees and all of that, just for them to understand and learn some of the new or emerging issues and to help them to effectively adopt or perform their role as members of parliament or as staff of parliament. Again, also, it helps once these parliaments work together, it helps to promote effective democracy and best practices, right? So once, country A, say Ghana is known to be a beacon of democracy, whether Kenya is known to be a beacon of democracy, whether Gambia is known to. So once a country is identified to have practicing good system of democracy or good governance, how do we learn from them? How do you also adopt some of the systems or some of the policies that they are using, right, in our own country? So it provides a platform for them to share. It provides a platform for these parliaments or MPs to learn from each other. Now, we want to look at some of the mechanisms that the regional parliaments use or helps them to function as institutions of parliaments or as legislative assemblies. And so when it comes to implementing and monitoring legal treaties, how do they ensure that these are done effectively in the region? One of the first ways is to ensure that the laws, the conventions, and the legislations that are passed in the continent align, right? So I mentioned in the beginning that if, for instance, the ECOWAS Parliament adopts a policy or a convention on gender, adopts a convention on elections, it is for the parliament to ensure that the national parliaments are also adopting policies or passing laws that fall in line with these international conventions that we have signed onto or that we have adopted, right? So that is one of the major roles of the regional parliaments, to ensure, to monitor, to be sure that countries are implementing the conventions that they have ratified or they have signed onto. Again, also is for them to ensure that the domestic legal frameworks still, again, fall in line with these international conventions that they have signed onto. So when Ghana is passing a law on, say, or a law to regulate elections, when Ghana is passing a law to regulate trade, does this law fall in line with a convention that has been adopted at Pan-African Parliament, or that has been adopted at the ECOWAS Parliament, or when it comes to the economic blogs that we have? So it's for them to ensure that all of these local laws also align with these international laws that we have passed or signed onto. And then again, they ensure that these policies or conventions or laws, after being passed, are implemented. Of course, I always like to come back to the fact that whilst we are discussing all of these things, you may have the question of whether they are doing it or not, right? And these are questions that will come to answer them, whether they are doing as they are expected to do, and why are they not able to do so if they are not doing so. Again, it is for these parliaments to also resolve the disputes that we see or that come up within the region, right? So the conflicts, the wars that come up on the continent, it is for the parliaments, the regional platform, to see how best they can resolve, to see what strategies or what mechanisms they can use to tone down, or they can use to reduce, or they can use to eliminate these conflicts that we have on our continent. And when the time comes for some of these laws to be amended and reviewed, it is also for the parliaments to monitor to ensure that these are done again in line with the international conventions. And then finally, it is for the parliament to ensure that the public is aware of some of these conventions, the public is aware of some of these laws that we have on the continent, to enhance the consultation between citizens and the parliament, to enhance consultation between civil society and even media, between media and the parliament or the representatives of parliament, and to discuss to see how best we can implement or ensure professionalization of these legal instruments and conventions. So quickly, I want us to look at the regional parliaments that we have in Africa. So in this table, you'd see the various regional parliaments we have, the instruments that establishes them or that empowers them to operate. And then also, most importantly, which I like, and gives us an idea of what the parliament is doing, is the status of operation, right? So status of operation in the sense that what is the capacity, or to what extent is the parliament able to operate without interference? What is the level of independence of that parliament? So for instance, when you take the East African Legislative Assembly, you have the instruments that establishes it. And then when it comes to the status of operation, it says that the East African Legislative Assembly has both the advisory and full legislative powers, right? So the East African Legislative Assembly has the advisory, they play the role of an advisory body, and then also when it comes to legislating, they also have the legislative powers. Of course, there will be the questions of whether indeed they are able to use their legislative powers more than the advisory powers that they have. When you come to the ECOWAS Parliament, also you have the protocols and all the treaties establishing it. And then when you come to the status of operation, it gives, or it says that the parliament serves as a forum for dialogue, consultation, and consensus, right? So unlike we know for assemblies, or we know for parliaments to be a legislative institution, here we say that the ECOWAS Parliament is a forum for dialogue, to consult and to build consensus on issues of interest. When it comes to the Interparliamentary Union of IGAD, as I mentioned earlier, also this institution plays an advisory role, right? And then when it comes to the mother parliament, the mother of all parliaments, Pan-African Parliament, also, which is established by the protocols and all of that. It says that the parliament serves as a consultative forum, and then again, they only have advisory powers, right? So the Pan-African Parliament is only a platform where MPs or where members consult and discuss, they deliberate on the issues of common interest. They can only advise. The bloc, the economic bloc, the regional economic bloc, which is the AU, but they do not have the legislative powers. And I'm sure we all know the problem, or we all know about this issue. And so we'll look later in the discussions, we'll look at how, as media men, as journalists, how can we advocate? How can we mobilize around these issues to ensure that the parliament are given the legislative powers to perform or to operate as a usual parliament would do. These parliaments or these regional parliaments do not operate in silos. They usually work with the national parliaments, as I've already mentioned in my earlier slides. So regional parliaments work closely with the national parliaments, as the members of parliament are nominated or elected through the national assemblies or the national parliaments and all of that. And how do they do this? They do this usually through policy coordination. I explained earlier that when there are regional policies, economic policies, or social policies, policies on human rights, whether they are laws or conventions, it is the mandate of these regional parliaments to work closely with the national parliaments or assemblies to ensure that they are conforming to the dictates of the regional instruments or regional conventions that we have. Again, also is for them to ensure that the countries are ratifying the international treaties, the conventions that we have, to ensure that they are ratifying them and to ensure they are implementing these treaties after ratification. I'm sure we are aware of some conventions that member countries member countries of the PAP, member countries of ECOWAS may have to ratify, yet they haven't done so. All of these things, it's for the parliament to ensure that they are continuously impressing on the national parliaments to ratify them. It is after these ratifications that they can ensure that the implementation is going on smoothly. Again, they work closely with the national parliaments to build the capacities of MPs or even the staff of parliament, right? So once we realize, or once the regional parliaments identify any gaps in capacity or knowledge in members of parliament belonging to a particular country or in a particular issue or thematic area, say climate, say gender, say trade, it is for the parliament to now mobilize. It is for the parliament to now train the MPs or the members of the parliament to be able to perform as we require of them. And then finally also is to ensure, while working with these national parliaments, to ensure that our development agendas align, right? So of course, countries may have different development agendas, but when it comes to the continental level, what is that common development agenda that we have or we've bought into, we've signed on, right? So they ensure that if there is any continental trade policy, right? If there is any continental development agenda, all countries' agenda, all countries' economic policies fall in line or align with these continental development agendas, right? So it's one thing that they also seek to ensure that countries are doing well in their collaboration and in their working with them. Here we want to look at some of the mechanisms that they use to coordinate the activities or that helps them to perform their mandates, right? And as I mentioned from the beginning, as usual, every parliament uses committees, or every parliament has committees, right? And so when it comes to the operations of committees at the regional level also, there are joint committees, there are working groups, there are special committees that are created or established to handle specific issues. And so these committees work together with those committees, sometimes in the national assemblies or national parliaments, to ensure that they are discussing, to ensure that they have a consensus on issues of common interest, right? Again, also, they use meetings and conferences to meet to discuss some of the common interest issues that countries want to discuss. For instance, if it's emerging issues of climate change, if it's issues of conflicts, how do we come together in the workshops, or how do we come together in the sessions and all the conferences, the meetings that we have to discuss these pressing issues and deliberate and take action on them. So these are mechanisms that they use. Again, also, parliaments create interparliamentary forums, right? And these forums help parliaments to learn from their peers, helps parliaments to learn from each other. So we have, for instance, the IPU, which is a parliamentary forum. Again, we have the Commonwealth Parliamentary Forum, where countries in the Commonwealth learn from each other. They meet to discuss issues in the Commonwealth and all of that to advance parliamentary democracy and all of that. Again, also, there are online platforms and portals that parliaments use to, collaborate or to work together with other parliaments. For instance, when you take the Commonwealth Parliamentary Forum or Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, for instance, they have an academy, they have a platform where you have courses, you have subjects that MPs or staff of parliament can learn and build their capacity. All these platforms help to strengthen the capacities of members of parliament that we have in the region, or helps to train members of staff to be able to support MPs to deliver on their mandates. Some parliaments also share or publish regularly reports and updates, whether via newsletters, whether via reports or research or meeting minutes and all of that. So these are ways that they update themselves. These are ways that they get to know what's going on in each of their member countries, and they are able to take action on issues that are present on areas that they need to discuss and take quick action. This is an area that I'm sure if we are to open the floor now, we would hear a lot of challenges that the regional parliaments are facing, right? We can talk of the various regional parliaments that I spoke about earlier. A lot of challenges that is hindering their effective operations. And so usually when the conversations of the challenges of these parliaments come up, there are two questions that we usually want to ask. The first one is, to what extent have these regional parliaments fulfilled their fundamental objectives and core functions, right? To what extent, since their establishment, since their creation, have they been able to achieve half or more than we expected them to do in their existence, right? Again, do they really have the enabling powers, the legitimacy, and the status of authority to perform their functions, right? We know from the comparison that we did with the various legislative assemblies, right from Eastern Africa to Southern to West and all of that, we realized that most of these regional assemblies do not have the legislative powers. They do not have the authority to even check the economic block, the executive block of the regions. And so that becomes a big challenge. And of course, when we break out into the discussions, we look at how, as journalists, we can advocate some of these issues to ensure that parliaments are given the needed authority, they are given the necessary legitimacy to operate and to perform their functions. Of course, I've mentioned the challenges of operations. Most of the parliaments we have do not have the legislative powers. Where you look at some other regional parliaments like the EU, for instance, the European Parliament, for instance, the parliament has legislative powers. It has full authority to pass laws, right, to pass conventions and all of that. And these are binding on the countries or the member countries of the region. And so the issues or the major challenges that we have is in relation to the powers of operations, right? The legal powers that parliaments do not have to operate independently, right? And then also the process of elections, the process of appointing the representative to the parliament. Usually these are the key procedures or the key statuses that when parliaments do not have, it becomes difficult for them to operate independently and effectively. And so while we move on, while we break into our sessions, we'll discuss these challenges and look at how we can support these parliaments to overcome this as journalists. How can we support these parliaments? How can we help these parliaments, even in their weaknesses, right? Despite the challenges that we have identified and all of the other hindering blocks and all of that, what can we do to help them to overcome these challenges as journalists or as citizens of Africa? What do we look forward for them to do? One is to ensure that they have the legislative powers, to ensure that they are given the powers to pass the laws, they are given the powers to oversee the work of the economic authorities or the executive authorities that we have, like the AU or the economic blocks and all of that. They need the powers, they need the legislative powers to check their spending even. They need the powers to, check how they are even the policies or the decisions that are taken in there. It has to come to Parliament as the legislative institution or body to discuss and to take decisions on them. So this is something that if we really need our parliaments to perform or to deliver on their mandates, we need to ensure that they are given the legislative powers. Again, the committees and the different working groups must be empowered, right? And it's all, so you realize that it all comes from the powers given to the parliament. Once the parliament has the powers to legislate, indirectly, these powers also transcend into the committee's work, right? And so they are also empowered to do more. They are also empowered to ensure oversight, effective oversight over the different issue areas that the parliament handles or discusses. I mentioned again, they need the budgetary powers to check the spending of that. And finally, we need to address, or the parliament need to address their minds to the emerging issues globally and continentally, right? So what are the issues of climate? What are the changing dynamics of human rights? What are the emerging issues in trade and finance and all of that, or development generally, so that we are able to align our policies and our conventions and our operations to those global emerging issues and all of that. So these are ways that we can engage the parliaments on, and we can ensure that they are performing their mandates and they are performing their functions effectively. And so that is the conclusion, and that is all I have for today. We would now break into our sessions, and as I mentioned, I know you have the questions, or you have a lot to say when it comes to whether the various regional parliaments, the PAB, the ECOWAS parliaments, and all of that, whether they've been able to deliver on their mandates as regional parliamentary bodies or regional parliamentary institutions. And so in our breakout sessions, we will discuss the most critical challenges that we think are hindering the effective operations of these regional parliaments. And then as journalists or as media, how do we advocate for these issues to change? What role can we play in ensuring that these issues are changed for the better? And so thank you very much for paying attention and staying true. I'm sure at this time, if there are any questions, I'll be glad to take them. If not, take over for us to break into the sessions. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Ben.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Ben, for that insightful presentation. Now it's time for question. I think Ben has put a question on the platform, right? Ben, I think you are asking members to ask a question, after which we will be moving into our breakout session. So does anyone have any question to ask Ben?
I just wanted, my name is Lizzie once again. I work with other people from Nigeria. I just wanted Mr. Ben to summarize, because he was really talking and there was no break. But though we were following the slide for me, but I want him to just summarize this is topic for us before we go to the break, even if it's 1 minute summary of this whole topic before we go into the breakaway section. Thank you.
Ben,
Okay.
a request
you.
has come.
Yes, that's right. But are there any other questions so that I can take all of them?
Well, Ben, okay. This is Toboloko. I am connecting from Lesotho. I just wish to know how serious are the member countries taking the regional parliament serious in terms of implementing some of the resolutions that such parliaments have adopted. Thank you.
Okay. Right. Any other? Can we take a final one? Okay. If there are none, then I can go ahead with the questions that have been posed or the comments made. Yeah. So, in summary, all that this is about, or what we are being, we are trying to draw attention to the fact that while working with the regional parliaments, there are mechanisms that you can use as a journalist, right, to advocate and also to help the MPs, the staff, or the people we work with to ensure that they are delivering on their mandates, right? But of course, we looked at some of the challenges facing these parliaments. And we looked at the operational challenges, we looked at the legislative powers they do not have, and that is preventing or hindering their effective performance and all of that. So it is for us now as media men, upon identifying these issues, upon understanding some of the mechanisms that these parliaments use to work together, to coordinate amongst themselves and all of that, how do we plug in? How do we also work with them effectively to ensure that whether in our advocacy, whether in our reportage and all of that, we are supporting them to perform their mandates as regional parliaments. Basically, that's the summary of this presentation. And on the question of whether the parliaments have taken serious the implementation of the conventions or the statutes of the parliaments, I think it will even be for us to engage on in the breakout sessions. Of course, all of us have our own perspectives, whether the parliaments or the national parliament, or even in totality the regional parliaments, have taken these treaties serious, right? Of course, there are challenges when it comes to even ensuring that countries are complying with the treaties, the conventions, and all of that. So we can discuss them more in the breakout sessions as some of the challenges, as the questions have been indicated. Then we can see how we can also support the process or plug in as journalists.
All right, thank you once again, Ben, for that clarification. It's now time for us to go into our breakout session. But Ben, I'll ask a favor of you. Now the hosting status has come to you. Can you help us get into the breakout session? And also reiterate the question for us, what we're going to discuss at the breakout session. Okay, so here it says that discuss and present on the 3 most critical challenges hindering the effective operations of regional parliaments. What role can the media play in advocating for change? Discuter et présenter les 3 défis les plus importants qui entravent le fonctionnement efficace des parlements régionaux. Quel rôle les médias peuvent-ils jouer dans la promotion des changements? So this is what we're going to discuss at the breakout session, whilst Ben is helping us with the breakout session.
Clement,
Yeah.
I don't get what the role you're asking me to. You said the breakout session.
Yeah, I was saying that you should help us do the breakout session, like enable the breakout session for us and put us into 2 groups where you will divide us into the breakout sessions. So one portion to go to one, and then another portion to go to another group. Are you able to help us with that?
The 3 most critical challenges hindering the effective operations of regional parliaments. From all the presentations, the challenges and the mechanisms we can engage and use, or how parliaments should coordinate themselves and cooperate among themselves. What role can the media play in advocating for some of these changes that we seek in the regional parliamentary bodies? If we are all here, then we can start with group 1. After that, group 2 can also follow suit. Group 1, can we take your presentation?
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Elizabeth, once again from Nigeria. So in our discussion, we felt like these are the challenges, or some of the challenges that are hindering operations or effective operations in our regional parliament. Number one, we said lack of uniformity of ideas, lack of uniformity, first of all, and then secondly, uniformity of ideas. What do we mean by this? That as a parliament or as a region, we should have a uniform idea that we will deal with, for instance, for a particular session, like we have in Europe and other regions, a continent. But unfortunately, here, the parliamentarians prefer to drive their own personal agenda instead of the agenda, coming up with an agenda that will bring development and progress to the city, to its citizens. And another issue we looked at that is hindering effective progress is corruption. We know that corruption is deeply rooted in the fabric of African countries, and the legislature or the parliament are not exempted. Even in the parliament, there is so much corruption that goes on. So if we have this enemy called corruption, then there will be no, of course, corruption is an enemy to the people, to citizens, because it hinders progress and development in a country. And the region is not exempted, is not an exception. So it will definitely hinder progress and development and effective parliamentary work or activities. And then another issue we also looked at, there must be a uniform approach to issues by different countries, because we do not look at for instance, look at the coup that has taken place. That one, it was so easy for the different countries to hop on it because it's negative. Almost all the African countries had to overthrow their leaders through coup. And it was very easy for most African countries to just hop on that and begin to overthrow their leaders. But when it comes to real issues that will bring about development, we don't usually hop on those kind of ideas. So we should stop for the country, for the region to be developed, and for us to have an effective regional parliament, we have to have a uniform approach over issues. We have to condemn what is condemnable, and then if we are going for anything that will bring about development, let all African or regional parliament speak in one voice and ensure implementation. And another issue again is high turnover of lawmakers. We know that every tenure, for instance, in Nigeria, there is a 4-year tenure for both the president and lawmakers. And every year, every season, instead of returning those lawmakers who have experience, who have been there, we bring in new lawmakers, and because they lack experience, they are not solid, they are not grounded in the parliamentary functions or activities or how the parliament works, it becomes an issue. They start learning all over why the ones that have this idea, have this experience that have been there must have been sacked. So we need to look into that issue. The African region should come up with, it shouldn't be each country should have its own laws or ways of keeping people in the parliament. There should be that uniform law that will say we are having this parliamentarian in the next 10 years or in the next 20 years. And for any changes to take place, that parliamentarian must have spent like 20 years so that his experience could be impacted on others. And because of his experience, it will also bring about progress and development to his or her country or to the region. So we need to look into that as well. And lack of transparency. Most times our parliament is shrouded with secrecy. Most of the things they do in parliament, let's take for instance, in my country, Nigeria, issues of security, most times journalists are being asked out. They discussed it behind closed doors. And in most cases, nobody comes out to brief the journalists of what has transpired. And the citizens will be seeking answers to some of the issues. And these issues are discussed behind closed doors. So how will the citizens know that this is what is happening in terms of our security? So most activities, like even the budget of the parliament, for instance, the ECOWAS parliament, nobody has a clear picture. I cover the ECOWAS parliament, for instance. We do not have a clear view of how the ECOWAS parliament works, how it functions, how is the money expended. So these are some of the challenges hindering regional effective regional parliament. I can go on and on, but because time will not permit me, let me quickly run over what the media can do. The media should seek for more accountability. I know that some must kill a man. Someday, somehow, each and every one of us is going to die. So if you have been designed for exposing, if you are going to die for exposing the truth, then so be it. I know that some journalists have even been kidnapped in their bid to expose the truth, but we should not be deterred. So we must continue to ensure that the truth, there is transparency and accountability in our various regional parliament. And then secondly, journalists should not be scared. I've already spoken about that journalists should not be scared in discharging their responsibilities. And no amount of, I don't know how to put it, no amount of gratification should make a journalist want to sell his conscience by sweeping the truth under the carpet. No amount of gratification, I insist, because most times these MPs or politicians, they see journalists as people that can just give gratification and whatever they want killed will be done. So I want to use this medium today to call on journalists here that as we go back after this training, go back to carry out our mandate or our responsibilities, we should have it at the back of our mind that no amount of gratification should make you want to sweep any issue that needs to be exposed under the carpet. And by doing so, our region will move forward. There will be progress and development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. That was a very profound presentation, and thank you to all the group members. Clearly, we see the challenges that our regional parliaments are facing, and even to the extent that from your experience, you even share that, you are not even clear on how the ECOWAS parliament operates, and that is very telling. That if as a journalist who has reported for many years from the ECOWAS parliament is saying that it's not clear, there is no clarity in the operations, what to do, what not to do, and all of that, then that's a big challenge, and that's something that we all need to play a role to rectify that. And yes, indeed, we need more accountability from the journalists, from the role that we play, monitoring Parliament, not just reporting from Parliament, but also understanding the issues and ensuring that we hold these representatives accountable and not trying to always be in bed with them. So thank you very much for your presentation. We'll move quickly to Group 2. Group 2,
Thank
can
you.
we hear from you and have your presentation?
Ben, this is Tuboloko Nsonyano from APPN Lesotho. I'll be representing the Group 2. So one of the things that our group had identified is that there is lack of political will by some of the member states who are members of the regional parliament. By the political will, we mean committing necessary resources to allow the members to travel to those occasions. In Lesotho, we had a situation whereby the delegates of the Pan-African Parliament were unable to attend the sitting because there was no budget for that particular time for them to travel, and that they had effectively denied the country the chance to be represented in that continental parliament. The second point that we discussed is that these parliaments lack financial autonomy. This is largely attributable to the fact that some member states delay to pay the contributions to those parliaments, such as the annual subscription. So thereby effectively hinder an impact on their work, such that their operations, their administrative issues get affected. The third point that we discussed was that the third issue that we discussed was that there is also there needs to be an ownership by the of the issues of that parliament. That is to say, many journalists do not identify with those parliaments because they usually don't make it to the news. They are only reported about during when they open and when the country delegation leaves for to attend their sittings, and after that it is only silence, and there is little to say about them. Hence, many citizens do not resonate on. So, what the media can do is that media should interrogate, uh, interrogate, and what must happen to member states who are dragging their feet, who are uh, showing less commitment, who are not committed to ensuring that uh, they they support fully the operations and the operations of those parliaments to ensure that their goals are fully realized. And the second one is that media should have to enhance the publicity of this parliament, such that many people at the grassroots level, they should know them, they should identify with them, they should resonate with them, they should be aware of what is being discussed, as it directly also affects them, as the decisions that are sometimes taken in those parliaments, they do affect them. The the last issue I think that the media should do is to every time try and seek accountability, try and ensure that there is accountability by interviewing the delegations of their respective countries and ask them what commitments they have been made, what decisions they have been made in those parliaments, what resolutions they have they been achieved in those parliaments, and how they affect them, how they affect their economic, social, political life. Okay, thank you. That's it. I think that marks the end of our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Toboloko, for the presentation. That was a good one, also coming from Group 2. And of course, political will is very, very, very important. That is like the major challenge we face from not just our regional parliament, even national parliaments and political office holders generally, you know, the will to even cede some of your power to another institution to check whatever you are doing is what is making some of our parliaments ineffective, and what is making them not able to operate as they should be able to do. And so that is a very big challenge you identify over there. And then I agree that one of the things that we can do as journalists is to interrogate the representatives of the continental parliaments, our regional parliaments at home, and ensure that we are keeping them on their feet in whatever they do, not just representing in name, but what are they doing? What are the things ongoing there and all of that? So thank you all very much for staying true and then also participating in the discussions and all of that. If there are any general or final comments or questions, we can take them before we wrap up finally. Are there any questions or comments you want to make finally? If there are none, then I would like to thank you very much for